So welcome to this morning's webinar. We're going to discuss the future of work, which is all about kind of hybrid working. Delighted to be joined by Wendy Edie, Managing Director of eCom Scotland, and also Barry Hynd, Chief Operating Officer at FISSS. And both of them are going to share their experiences and the plans for the future. Just to prevent any issues with technology, just obviously where possible, keep yourself muted and your camera off if you can. We're going to record the session and that's going to be added to our client portal on the website. And there's an opportunity for kind of questions at the end, and we'll ask potentially some questions as we go throughout the session. So if you want to ask questions as the panel are speaking, feel free to use the chat facility that we have available. So we're here to discuss the future of work. We were kind of chatting just before people had come online there that we're all having to, keep the kids quiet. Barry's got a 10-week-old puppy, so we're all kind of used to this, new normal now. So yeah, we are here to discuss what the future kind of might look like. And I suppose as the pandemic has gone on, many businesses have recognised the value of technology to help people to work from home, and also to try and kind of maintain high standards of productivity. And what we're now seeing is employees becoming more vocal about what they kind of want from an employer, and also what their kind of future setup around home working or office working might look like. Obviously, there's quite a lot of kind of changes to consider, and lots of things that need to be addressed from a kind of business point of view. Obviously, looking at a kind of business recovery point of view, and also looking at employee engagement and employee satisfaction. So, if all these things are done well, then hopefully it can really help a business move on and really develop. But obviously, we do know that if it's handled badly, then that could be a kind of PR disaster, and we'll just discuss a couple of examples of that as we get through this morning's session. So quite interested, just if anybody wants to kind of put a note in the chat, probably just to get an idea in terms of what your kind of plans are at the moment, just around what you're thinking about as a result of the pandemic. Will that change the way that your business works as a result of the pandemic? So just looking for people just to kind of put some comments in the chat, whether you'll introduce a mix of home and office working, whether you'll continue to home work for all employees, or whether there'll be a combination of home working or have people got kind of yet to decide. So I don't know if I'll maybe ask my panel very quickly if you guys have got any thoughts on that. So I don't know, Wendy, have you guys come up with anything around that as yet?
Oh, we'll definitely be doing a mix of home and office working. There's we've been very lucky in that when we, in the March last year, we were able to all go home and continue working. So we've not really had to furlough many people, and we've been able to keep sort of business and continuity going, just because of the nature of the work that we do. But when we're coming back, there was a lot of people that were like, no, I need to get back in the office. I really feel I need to be back in the office. And then as time's gone on and we've helped people to, acclimatise themselves and get a better home working situation, they're now changing their mind. So I think I'm probably only about 10% of the team are wanting to have the office as their main working base. So that for us is about 4 people. Yeah.
Yeah, good. Thanks for that, Wendy. And Barry, I noticed that you've kind of put in the chat a mix of home and office, and we've got a couple of comments in there as well about staff becoming more vocal, and looking at a survey that's been circulated. So some good practice there. Fantastic.
Yeah, I think from our side, we had to leave our office in Edinburgh at the very start of the pandemic. So I was in a weird position at FISSS, where when I started at FISSS the day before the pandemic hit. So I've never actually met anybody in FISSS for the entire 15 months that I've been there. But we had to take a decision quite quickly to come out of the office. We were seriously impacted by the pandemic. Our business went down about 80% in about 2 weeks. So we were very much in sort of survival mode very, very quickly, in terms of trying to and take costs out of the business that were not essential. So we had to make use of the furlough scheme. We had to really sort of try to survive, so, and that first 6 months was all about kind of surviving. But I think just similar to Wendy, there's not a huge appetite from a lot of people to return to that type of environment, and I think we will go to a mix of home and office. I think we'll probably need a space for people to go to, but I think what we probably won't do is we won't mandate the use of one or the other. We'll give them the option to use it, but equally, if they don't want to use it and they're happy that they're productive from home and that they've got the right setup at home to make them productive, then it's just an option, and that's what we've been trying to do. We've been trying to give people options, rather than sort of saying, you must do this or you must do that. So we use a quite a cool tool in the business called Trickle, and I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's a Scottish-based tool, and it's basically it's a system that allows us to take mood and temperature of the business at any given point in time. So we can send out little mini polls, with just little faces on them that say, how are you finding this, how are you finding that, and that allows us to very quickly, over the course of even a day, understand where people are at any given day, and that's been hugely beneficial in terms of sort of understanding that kind of underlying sentiment.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, look forward to hearing more about that later on, Barry. And I've taken a wee note of Trickle. Definitely kind of check that out. So, and I'll make sure that's going to put on the link on the portal. We'll hear more about that later on.
Mm-hmm.
So good. So good, great that you're obviously trying to canvass some feedback from people. I mean, I'm sure we're all reading at the moment kind of various surveys and different results around what maybe other businesses are doing or what kind of people are after. So what I kind of did just as part of my research, I suppose, for today's session, was just having a look at some of the figures published by the CIPD. They kind of carried out quite a kind of big survey recently, and you've touched on it there as well, guys, already. But their findings were that more than 80% of employees are looking for a kind of hybrid model. So it's not a case of everything going back to how it was kind of pre-pandemic days. And more than 70% think that flexible working will be that kind of new normal. It was quite interesting, actually, because I remember a couple of employers that we were working with kind of before the pandemic, where staff members had asked for a kind of flexible working approach, and that had been kind of rejected. And then a few weeks later, obviously COVID had kind of struck, and then the businesses wanted them to be flexible and start working from home. So that was some interesting conversations around that with employees then saying, well, I thought you couldn't accommodate a flexible working approach. So that's obviously an internal kind of PR challenge that some of them will have. And obviously at the moment, a lot of businesses we're finding is that there's issues around perhaps retaining talent. There's issues around attracting talent, and what job seekers are kind of looking for is that 81% of them say that having that flexibility makes the role more attractive. So I suppose there is an advantage that if you have got a kind of flexible approach to how you operate, then it's going to give you a little bit of an advantage around attracting kind of more people into your business. And also retaining them, and I suppose as well, if it's a kind of true kind of remote role, it kind of does open up opportunities for that talent pool to be a bit wider. So if you're kind of trying to recruit, say, within Glenoffice, for example, and then all of a sudden you've got remote and it can be done from anywhere, that opens up that talent pool, far wider than someone just in, say, Glenoffice. So there's definitely kind of advantages for it. And I know you guys are obviously big on your technology, so you're interested as well that 50% would leave due to poor technology. So that's where it's kind of not set up properly. So that's quite interesting. So yeah, just some of the kind of stats that I kind of found around the kind of research on today's session. I know technology is one that comes up, certainly from an employee engagement survey. Quite often, Barry, we'll kind of look at Q12. So I know you've mentioned Trickle there, but I know one of the questions on Gallup's kind of Q12 questions is having the kind of tools and resources to do your job. And quite often that is around technology. And if it's kind of poor technology, not used properly, that's a big frustration for people, and definitely an indicator around employee engagement. So I think businesses investing in technology and making sure that's set up properly is definitely the way forward as things develop.
Yeah, I think at FISS we weren't set up for it. We weren't set up for remote working at all when I came in. Like somebody handed me a laptop and it didn't even connect to anything, and I'm like, what do you want me to do with this? So we spent 3 months basically figuring out the technology part, and then a second part of that was making sure that people had the right environment to work in. So we've had to buy people desks, we've had to buy people chairs, just lots of things to just making sure that that environment that they're working in is as comfortable as it possibly can be. And like you say, because that doesn't surprise me. When the technology doesn't work, you become super unproductive, and I don't think anybody at their heart likes to be super unproductive. I think they want to be productive, and technology plays a huge part in that.
Yeah, interesting. I was speaking to a friend who he's a kind of house builder, and what he was kind of saying recently was previously when they were doing any kind of property developments and what have you, the first question that people would ask is what's the local schools like, and all questions around that. Now it's all what's the broadband, what's the connectivity. They're not interested in that, and they want to make sure that there's a kind of home office thing to set up in the house, and asking about the broadband. That's nobody's even asking about schools now. He said it is all around that, and he said that's been a complete shift in the last few months. So technology is definitely something that people are curious about.
I found it was kind of in a phased approach, because when we first went home, there was still that mentality of short term. This was going to be short term, and they were like, "This will do. This will be fine." And I was like, "I don't actually know." I was like, it took a long time to get people to think actually they were putting up with things like sitting on a dining room chair, and those types of things. So I initially, in the first couple of weeks, we have what we call eCom circles, which are like little town halls, and we used Teams for that, and going around and checking everybody's kind of set up, and then I had one of our tech team go around and make sure everybody's set up. But I had to go around again, and about maybe 3 months later, because we could really see the length of time that was going to be happening, and that was at the stage where we were, if you were in the office, we would do display screen assessments and those types of things to make sure people are comfortable and sitting, and it's at eye level, and it's all health and safety as well. So we had to run that again for the home working, just to make sure that we were meeting all our responsibilities as an employer.
Yeah.
And I think we're still moving, and this is now the next phase, because there is still a level of make and do, because we're still thinking there's a little bit of that normal coming back. So we're going to move into a next phase where there'll be the flexibility, but from a setup point of view, maybe I'm being a bit stingy, but I'm thinking, well, they're not having a fantastic setup in the office and a fantastic setup at home. One of them has to be one environment has to be the dedicated area, and we use Breathe HR, so you can go in and choose, so they can determine where their main base is, and working on that information, I can then make sure their setup is appropriate going forward. But that's probably going to be September onwards at this rate, looking at the government information.
Yeah, good. And I suppose you'll be seeing as well, lots of businesses maybe on LinkedIn or just in the news around kind of talking around what they're doing, and some of that's a lot of the bigger employers. But again, you're also just getting a sense around what some SME organisations are doing as well, maybe within Scotland or across the UK. So we'll kind of touch on that in a minute. So I suppose, and interestingly, is around the kind of government position at the minute around, I suppose, what's been labelled Freedom Days. So England are obviously kind of looking to kind of ease restrictions on the 19th of July, and Scotland aiming on the 9th of August. And interestingly, the Scottish Government's kind of position on that, so I've kind of just highlighted in brackets there, is that there's still a greater degree of working from home than pre-COVID-19 where this is possible and appropriate based on business and employee choice. So that's on the kind of official Scottish Government kind of website. So,
see, my team saw that and they were like, "Oh, are you opening the office on the 9th of August?" And I was like, no, there's a little bit underneath that says no immediate return to full office working on 9th of August. Right. It's kind of level half, 0.5 or something. There's restrictions for travel. There's going to be restrictions for still within working environments. Don't know what they'll be though.
Yeah. So I suppose it's just planning ahead for that now, I suppose, over the next few weeks. And I mentioned there what some of the other businesses that we've seen in the news are doing. So again, just as part of some research into what other businesses are doing. So nationwide, I think we're one of the first to kind of say, have a work from anywhere kind of policy. But we know that a lot of SME organisations had said the same, but nationwide got a bit of traction on that. I think because those 13,000 people essentially could work from anywhere. NatWest recently has said that they need a kind of core staff to work in the office, so it's 13% of their workforce. And again, be interesting to see how that kind of goes down with the people who have to work in the office versus the high proportion who are not having to do that. So that'll be interesting to see how that's kind of received internally. And then Goldman Sachs had initially kind of said that for their London employees, they would all be back by June. I think that was based on the UK government kind of saying that by the 21st of June, restrictions would be lifted. Obviously, with that now being pushed back, they're now kind of anticipating that they want all office-based workers back by the 19th of July. So that's an interesting kind of take on it. And then, interestingly, just kind of reading some of the stuff that Apple are doing. So they've kind of said that they want employees in the office 3 days a week. And I'm sure we've all probably just seen the article a few weeks ago. It's not related to this, but with the Brewdog ex-employees putting their kind of letter around the culture, etc. within there, Apple have kind of done something similar where their employees have kind of written a letter and just expressing kind of how unhappy they are with that. I suppose being imposed to work 3 days and not having that employee voice. So that could be an internal kind of PR disaster for them as well. Just around that, and Apple are seen as one of the leading companies in the world, and lots of people kind of look up to what they do, but internally they seem to have kind of made a bit of a mess around the fact that they're imposing 3 days in the office, which hasn't been well received by the employees. If you kind of read the kind of letter that some of them have done, so I suppose it's trying to kind of learn some lessons around what these organisations are doing and what we can do in our own businesses moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us anyway, the employees at the centre of this for us, it's not about us imposing anything as a business. I mean, the Apple thing is frankly ridiculous in terms of imposing anything on, anything on your staff. I mean, this is something that's never happened before. And it's unprecedented from that side. But I think that the businesses that will prosper out of this are the ones that put the employee at the centre of it and try to find a solution that works for all of them. I don't think it's going to be a sort of one size fits all approach. It's not going to be like that. It probably will almost boil down to an employee by employee approach. And I know that's maybe not practical with the bigger businesses, but I think for SMEs, certainly with the work that I do, down at that sort of lower level of employees, it is sort of they're looking at it on the basis of each individual person and what's right for them, rather than it being, okay, well, we're having this policy and you're just going to have to work within it. So I definitely think, like what your slide says, the employee is central to whatever the business has to do.
Yeah, absolutely spot on. So now probably a good time, actually. I'll maybe hand over to yourself, Wendy, just to give a kind of brief overview in terms of what you've done over the last few months at eCom. Give a bit of an introduction in terms of what eCom do as well, and just talk about what you've done around perhaps how you've maintained morale, productivity, what your kind of plans for the future are, and just have a bit of a chat around what you're doing, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. So well, eCom Scotland are a learning technology solutions company, so we're celebrating our 25th year in business this year. So as the internet's evolved in the last 25 years, the demands of the workforce to be connected, to be trained, to meet compliance and regulatory demand, to evidence effective training, to accredit people's skills remotely, even more so now, these are all being met with eCom systems using the latest technology from VR, AI, and probably everything in between at this rate. Pre-COVID, the workplace was already being changed by both technology and skills availability, and you can see even more now the big focus on skills in the workplace. So business leaders that we're working with are considering how they can use the technology as an enabler to support remote working, while ensuring that their kind of future organisational state's more organic and flexible in the recent years. So we were very lucky in that, I mean, don't get me wrong, when March came in, it was tricky, because one of the main differentiators for us is that we deliver high stakes exams, online exams around the world, but they still need an invigilated centre. So that, you know, revenue was hit, but it was a specific area of the business. There was other areas that people had invested timely in creating training. For instance, their core business model was to go around the world training, and they managed just to, at the end of 2019, had started working with us to put it all online. So they were able to very quickly switch on the system and start and create business continuity. So, you know, there was a very mix. We didn't have to pivot anything, but we did need to sort of make some levels of adjustment. That being said, we then moved into, we were able to use what e-proctoring, which is sort of online, well, it is online like invigilation. It used to be, you know, people would be a bit reluctant, but then people would be reluctant to have full meetings online, and they would rather see them face to face. So there was a level of sort of embracing all that technology. They were going through this massive big step change as it was, so they might as well just do that too. So we moved on to there. So our teams were very busy. So, but in the meantime, we then had to support them all, and I just went into full sort of support mode for the team. So made sure they were making sure all the clients and the projects and the contracts were strong and secure, and then I just made sure that the team felt secure in their roles, because, you know, at that time people just didn't know. They didn't know if they were going to lose their job. They didn't even know what furlough meant. I mean, really, I mean, it's a common word now, but you know, Ali, you supported us around about that time as well. We had, I mean, I think in the March, at the end of March, I think I had an eCom circle. What is furlough? Like, nobody knew. What am I going to be furloughed? You know, and there was just a lot of, certainly for me, trying to filter that all the information that was coming in from the Scottish Government at the time, and trying to work out what affected us as a company, and then making sure we communicated it out to all the wider teams. So it kind of came in waves and themes. So I ended up doing a sort of ended up being called Wendy's Words, but that was the marketing team did it. But and we would do an internal message and an external message, and it was just to convey confidence really in what we were doing, what our plannings were, you know, so that clients felt secure, the team felt secure, and being able to work our way through this. And so they went through different themes, and really it was guided by how we all felt at the time, because people feedback, you know, it's great having a smaller team because you get a lot more feedback. Sometimes the wider teams, you know, bigger teams, it can be harder, but it sounds like I'm going to look at Trickle and see what that is. But we were able to get a lot of feedback, so it went through, you know, we did mindfulness and you know, looking at mental health or looking at other areas, and you know, and I can't even remember them all. There was that many of them that we worked through. So it was very much just about making sure that communication was there, and as I said before, checking in and making sure everybody's setup was right, and we put in additional resources to make sure people had places to go. So we use Microsoft Teams a lot, so there's like an IT support channel, and people can just ping up their the issues that they're having. We were set up for remote delivery anyway, so but we weren't using it for, but to this extent at the time. And I'm sure, if I remember rightly, I think it might have been the January, because we had a little bit of downtime, and we did a training session on Microsoft Teams for the whole team, not realising that we would practically be living in it for the next sort of 2 years. So so there's a lot of communication, and it's waned off now, I would say, but it's now starting to peak up again, because we kind of got into a stable phase, especially after Christmas, and we were all just waiting on this Freedom Day. But I feel like there's now a level of change again happening, and there's a little bit of ambiguity, like, you know, 9th of August, oh, we're all getting, you know, the office will open on the 9th of August. And I'm like, well, no, because we had a leak and I'm still to repair it. So we're going to sort that out as well. So yeah, there's, as I say, we've went from a very traditional office working model, office open 8 till 6, and we're going to what we are in now, and then this is our time to change into this hybrid working. There's a few areas I would say I'm comfortable with it. There's a few areas that I think I'd need to like concern myself with, like there's no commute. So you're like, say we want to create like a community hub where people, because most people can be productive wherever they're picked, and when I say home, I just mean anywhere, like a fluid area, or as long as, but you've got to think about security. If they're using public Wi-Fi, you know, it depends on their role and what they're doing. So there's a few security concerns in there. There's also, like, they wouldn't normally commute to the office. So say they're coming into the office and they're coming for a meeting, you know, whose responsibility is that middle time where they're travelling back home? You know, what if they have, this is probably gone too far, but I'm thinking, what if they have an accident, you know, and, you know, but they were travelling back to their place of work, and, you know, all of those things. I'm just wondering, and what happens to the time that's in there, you know, and, you know, I'm not saying, we fully trust, you know, I've got full trust in the team, but there's areas of greyness in there that we've still got to try and, so that they know, so that the expectations are set out, and I'm sure you'll be able to help us with that. Yeah, and as I say, there's just, I think we need, where we've probably struggled is that we can do all the tasks, and we can do all that task-driven stuff, the tickets, all those types of things. We can work that way, but when it comes to innovation and our R&D and that sort of collaborative thinking, it takes longer this way. It'd be nicer if we were able to all meet in and, you know, have sort of that kind of community hub type environment, and then be able to leave again, and, you know, as Barry was saying, just have a place to meet as a team. So I'd quite like, so we're looking at more technologies. I mean, obviously we deliver a lot of technologies for learning, all workforce learning, and collaboration tools there. So we obviously use them, but we are looking at other things as well. And we have a channel that people within the teams can suggest new software that we can use. Most of it's all cloud nowadays. So looking at technologies for collaboration tools and other areas, just to make like more sort of world-class ways of working, you know, in this way going forward.
Brilliant. Some good examples there, and obviously, Wendy, your team's kind of grown quite a bit during the pandemic as well. How have you found with the kind of remote working and onboarding kind of new employees? How's that work for you?
Yeah, well, we took on a member of team in the early part of the lockdown, and I kind of quickly realised that they were going to need a lot longer. You know, typical probationary period, it worked out they were going to need a longer time, and I wasn't sure if that was the candidate or it was because of how we were all working. So I put together a more thorough onboarding process, which we can use through our learning management system as well, and some of the tools that we have. And that seems to have worked really well. We've got a mentor and a buddy scheme that now runs, because you don't really get that sort of, what they call it, I mean, in America they call it a water cooler moment, but it's probably in our kitchen or in the stair or whatever. You don't really find people that are in other areas of the business. And as much as we're a small team, there's 44 of us now, we took on 7 new people since January. There's that number add up, yeah, I think so. And there's, you know, they're not able to sort of make acquaintances with other areas of the team because they're quite defined areas, different areas. So you've got marketing team, design, development, and they kind of do work independently. So so the buddy scheme is somebody that's completely off team, so it's on somebody else, and then the mentor is somebody within their team. And then obviously we've got their line manager, and then we've got their host, which is their onboarding host, which is our administration person. So lots and lots of good feedback from that process.
And do you think your kind of line managers are kind of set up well enough to kind of be managing people remotely? Like, what's your approach to that? Because I suppose in an office environment, it's a bit easier to maybe see how people are performing and maybe some of these behaviours. So how he's kind of coping with that strategy moving forward?
Mm-hmm. Some have found it a struggle because we're very much about growing talent. So some of them are, they were just emerging leaders prior to the pandemic, and then they suddenly had to kind of deal with it remote working. So they're not seasoned leaders that maybe can use some of their experience and tools to sort of in different ways. But what we have seen is emerging leaders that have come out, natural sort of leadership skills that have appeared from other individuals and grown within this environment. So I've seen some excellent growth and development for some individuals there. So it's just working with them and then supporting the ones that are maybe just struggling a little bit.
Good, fantastic. Great, thanks for that, Wendy. And a couple of other questions will come back to you later on if that's okay. Barry, would you like to kind of just share a bit around what you guys have been up to? You've obviously mentioned that you've kind of moved to the employer that you're at now during the pandemic. So just keen to kind of hear your experiences and how you've kind of gone about trying to help build a better workplace culture.
Yeah, I mean, we had a different set of circumstances. When you lose 80% of your revenue quite quickly, you're forced into making decisions about redundancies and furlough. So we very quickly had to learn about furlough and what that meant. At the very outset, over 50% of our team was on furlough. I think we learned a lot from putting people on furlough the first time. I think the first time we did it, we got it wrong. We put specific people on furlough, and I think through the feedback loop that we had at the end of that first furlough period, when it was starting to come back a little bit, what became apparent was that it would actually be better for us to have slightly more people on furlough, but on part-time furlough, so that we could keep a connection to the business. People felt quite disconnected from the business when they were on full-time furlough. Even though there was mechanisms in place for people to join social events and things like that, as long as it wasn't working, furlough was still able to work from that side. But we had to sort of we certainly learned the second time that let's make it part-time furlough and keep every single person connected to the business in some way. But also there was a need to obviously have people on furlough. The work wasn't there, and then the cost savings, were for us at that point in time were useful in terms of keeping the business kind of financially sustainable and not having to go back again and revisit potentially more redundancies. I think in terms of what we've tried to foster now, we've brought in a lot of different things. We brought in a weekly all teams meeting that wasn't really there before. So we have a proper meeting with everybody every single week, where any sort of discussions can come up, and we try and check in with everybody and make sure that they're okay. I think in terms of sort of similar experiences to what Wendy has in terms of feeling that people across teams aren't really interacting very much at the minute because you're sort of working with your own team. So how we get around that is we do something similar to what Wendy's done, where we have coffee events. So we call them coffee mornings, where we have a Slack bot that basically picks two random people and pulls them together, and they've got to spend sort of like half an hour together, sort of finding out different things about different people. And we use our weekly meeting to sort of try and highlight what people have found out about other people that surprised them. And that sort of, it kind of makes sure that people were paying attention when they were speaking to the other person, I guess, at the same time as well. But we do that to try and foster relationships across the business. We're now coming out of that. We're coming out of sort of fight mode and fight and flight mode, and moving more towards rebuilding the team now. So I think in the past 3 weeks we've made 3 additional hires in the last couple of weeks. So we're definitely starting to think more about growing it now, and those different challenges of how you bring people into a business that's essentially fully remote at the minute, from that side. So we've been doing some quite interesting things around. We've got little packs prepared for people that are starting. So we're making sure that people are going to meet people. Are, when people are new or starting, that people are going out to meet them, and all the kit and the little gift pack and all that's all been given personally, rather than it just being whacked on a courier and sent across to wherever it is in the country that they're operating in. So we're definitely having to find and ask ourselves the question about, what do we want this experience to be like? How can we make this positive? So we've even done things where we've got people to write messages on like welcome cards, and they're being sort of passed around everybody, and little sort of things being cut out and pasted in cards as well, even to that extent, because we're so distributed in terms of a group of people that even just passing it around, everybody did that when they were in an office. You used to get the little folder with the card inside that that everybody signed. So we're still trying to do the little personal touches like that, but we're having to continually ask ourselves the question of, how can we do this differently? But equally as well, I think this idea of building back better needs to be, it's not. I'm not a fan of Boris Johnson saying it, from that side, but I think there's some really big truth in it, in terms of there's an opportunity in all of this to build back your business better than it was before. And I think that's what I'm encouraging our team to do, is to say, let's not just go back to the way it was before because that's comfortable. Let's rip the rule book up. Let's make this a business we want to be proud to work in. Let's make it about us as a group of people, and try to be different, and try to be inclusive, and certainly so far it seems to be working. Certainly this stuff that we do through that trickle stuff, and I promise I don't get paid off trickle for anything that I tell you on this side, but it's got an engine in it that tells us sort of how things are doing over time. So we're able to ask questions in different ways to make sure that the underlying sort of understanding of it is understood by our business, and certainly from that side, we're getting some quite encouraging results out of it. Where it's showing that people do believe we're being more open, people do believe we're being more inclusive, people do believe we're being more considerate. And I think I don't think that's ever done. I don't think we'll ever go, our job's done and we're now the perfect employer. I think we always have this in us, that's this need to always want to be better, this need to always want to keep asking ourselves those questions. But I think it's positive, hopefully so far. We're moving in the right direction, and we're creating that better environment for everybody.
Brilliant, no, really good insight, Barry. So with Trickle, just curious then, how often would you canvass people's feedback using that tool? Is that something that's kind of built into your people plan, or is it just kind of done on an ad hoc basis?
No, there's a strategy behind it. So there's a couple of bits to it. So there's this thing that we call mood sense. So a mood sense is basically, it's akin to that little machine that you get at the end of the airport that says, how was your flight? And it's got 4 buttons. So what we've got to do is we've got to create questions that you can answer as one of those 4 buttons. And then what we do is we use these mood senses to do things that are called trickles. So that they're basically, we've done the mood sense, we've gauged the temperature, it's either positive or it's negative, and then off the back of that we then do what's called a trickle, which is basically a feedback loop. So it's this is what's happened on the mood sense, we want to know more about this. That then creates a sort of almost like a forum post of people being able to add into a chronological thread of stuff. We ask questions back and forward, and then when we feel that we've got a sort of an idea of where we want to go with it, what happens is we have what's called trickle champions. One of the trickle champions takes ownership for that issue. and then we basically the system alerts everybody that somebody's now taken ownership of it, and then we work through a process where we basically implement the issue and we solve it as a group of people. But what I was keen to make sure that to do on that was that, you know, we don't do it at a leadership team level, or it's not a senior level team. The Trickle champions are a group of people across the business, you know, from very junior to senior, and everybody's empowered to try and solve problems, because, you know, I'm not a massive fan of a top-down hierarchical structure. So everybody's empowered. So even in the last 4 weeks, you know, we're about to introduce Eden Red into the business, so you know, a sort of benefit system that looks at perks. We're about to we are about to sort of bring in a sort of and not an office, but a place where people can go to if they want to go somewhere that's not their home. And those have all come from Trickle ideas that people have put into a channel. You know, and so we do mood senses probably 2 to 3 times a week. A lot of the time, the mood sense just confirms that things are going well and people are happy. But in other areas where we've got to work on it, we do it on a, you know, 2 to 3 mood senses a week, maybe 1 to 2 trickles, and we get good engagement. I mean, I think the engagement at the minute, 90% of all employees are feeding into it. We're probably a bit of an exception because we've got a relatively small team of just under 20 people, but still to get that, you know, and we've maintained that for about 3 months now. So it's pretty clear people want to engage, they want to have a voice, and you know, Trickle just happens to be something that works for us. You know, from that side, I don't think you necessarily have to use Trickle. From that side, I think people just need to feel that they've got a voice and that they're being heard. You know, from that side, you don't necessarily always have to say you're right and we're going to change it. Actually, just considering it and sort of communicating it, that's nearly about 80% of the issue all the time. That I find, certainly.
That's really good. That sounds great. And how are you, I suppose, communicating that with the new starters in terms of positioning why you're kind of using Trickle? Is that part of your kind of onboarding process?
Yeah, there's an onboarding part to Trickle. So basically, when somebody new comes on board, they get access to a sort of practice bit of Trickle, where they can just basically get a feel for what it is, and stuff like that. But as well, you know, that's why we have the Trickle champion. So they get a call with a Trickle champion who talks them through what Trickle is, how we use it, things like that, and then starts to show them. It's very good because there's an app that sits on your mobile phone, so each time we put a mood sense out, you get like a ping, like a WhatsApp message, and with the four little faces on it, so we can get some very real time sort of insight into it. But we do make sure that, you know, everybody knows why we're using it and how important it is, and it's built into everything that we do. So our leadership team meeting that we have on a Monday, we have a sort of 10-minute standing agenda point about Trickle, you know, about what we're finding in it and maybe what we need to change. The champions have a weekly meeting as well, where the champions meet for 30 minutes and we just talk about how it's working, and what sort of activity we're seeing through it, what, you know, divvy out the different aspects of what we've got to do in it as a group of people, and it works really well, you know, in terms of just again sharing it out, taking the load out to everybody else, and not necessarily centralizing it with just a small group of people who are probably really busy. This way, you know, different people can take up the slack at different points in the month when maybe other people are busy as well, and we've been able to maintain it. We've been able to keep the pulse of it going, keep the cadence of it up all the time, because we've got that small group of champions that are really bought into what it's doing and can see that I can raise an issue, it can be considered with by the business, and where it's appropriate, change can happen as a result of it. And I think that's a lot of what employees want, is they want to be able to have a voice and see that they can affect change.
Good stuff. Yeah, thanks, Barry. Good insight there. And I suppose question for both of you as well then, because obviously this is kind of new territory for all of us in terms of leading our teams. What have you kind of done, if anything, differently around maybe your own personal development, and, you know, any kind of top tips that you can kind of share around that? So maybe one for you, Wendy, first.
I think, as I mentioned before, that sort of critical thinking and like looking at all the data and trying to work out how it was affecting us probably was the hardest bit. Intently watching the news and reading all the different reports, but I think one of the, just from just sheer luck of timing, I had been on a Goldman Sachs, although obviously not a very good representation there, but the 10,000 small business programme, and I was I wasn't even halfway through it, I was probably a third of the way through it, which is all about creating growth for SMEs. And in the March, everything changed and it went into a sort of reimagined programme, and it was more about survival. And they give you access to mentors in there, and it was all free. It was done through the Oxford University and the business school down there. And I'd only managed to visit once pre-COVID, and then we did the rest online. But they really quickly changed the programme to be able to make sure that the businesses that were on there were going to survive. And that was one of the good things about that, sort of, because I suppose from my confidence point of view, they said that they'd done so much due diligence on the companies that were on this programme, like that they said these are good businesses and no good business should go down at the, because of this pandemic. And I know it's just one phrase, but it actually really brought me a lot of confidence. And I was like, right, okay, let's do this sort of thing. And so all those types of things really helped, because we, when there were the Sybil's loan applications all came out, the bank manager said I was the first one in because I had already done my forecast. But that was because Goldman Sachs, where the financial people were telling us that, right, get this all worked out, do all these things. So they were already done. So that was fantastic. I'd say now things are changing, so we need to do more. It's getting back that growth mindset instead of the survival mindset, and making sure you're not. We've kind of felt like we've had our, we've been burned a little bit, by business wise and things like, like prior in the March, in February, we were looking to get another office in Edinburgh. And actually leave the offices that we're in and get something else. And now you're like, why bother? Right? So all those things have really kind of, the foundations of the business have changed a little bit. So the thoughts.
Good. Fantastic. And Barry, just quickly, for you, anything around your own kind of leadership and personal development that you've done or found through this?
Yeah, I mean, I think I just went back to my sort of, my values. One of the things that I really believe in is that, for me to be successful in the business, everybody else has to be successful before me, and it's about that sort of servant leadership model of, you putting them first. And I had to go back to that. I had to sort of clear my diary and make myself available for everybody else and help them break down their barriers and make them successful, so that in turn I would be successful at the end, that ultimately I would be successful at the end of it. So for me, it was about being more present, being more available, being there to listen to people, and at every part, at every part of the business as well. I think FISS had came from before I joined, FISS was a very hierarchical top-down structure. So it was a case of, to get permission for someone, it went up the chain and then a decision was made and then it came back down the chain again. So I spent probably the first 6 or 7 months saying to people, I'm not giving you permission to do that, because it's not my role to give you permission. If you think it's a good idea, just go and do it, and trying to empower people to do that. And yeah, nothing really sort of groundbreaking from that point of view. It's more just being there and hopefully giving people that reassurance that I was there, that I was accessible. I think sometimes in business you can, if you're one of the most senior people, I think some people can sort of revel in the being busy and always being in meetings, and I take the complete opposite approach, which is I should be the one that's not as busy. That you know, other people can do the meetings. They don't. I don't have to do them all. From that side, and I think, well, I'd like to think anyway that people took assurance from the fact that if they needed to speak to me, I always tried to be available. You know, and it didn't matter what it was. It didn't matter if it was because, you know, their chair wasn't working properly, or, you know, they were having to prop up their desk with 3 beer mats or whatever. You know, I was able to sort of identify those things and just say, okay, look, let's change that. Let's make that environment a wee bit more positive for you to work in. And it seems to have went well so far anyway, you know.
Fantastic, good stuff.
That sort of empathetic leadership's really that's what, when I'm looking at other businesses and ourselves, that seems to be the ones that are really working well, because they're just listening to people and genuinely valuing the team.
Yeah, I think you're right, Wendy. It isn't. I think people can overcomplicate it. I think that it is about listening, and I think there's a reason you've got. You know, I think my granddad used to say to me, "You've got 2 ears and 1 mouth." There's a reason you've got them in that proportion, and I think that's always something that I remind myself of a lot. Is that, you know, listen well. You know, and I think as well, we can be, as leaders, we can be guilty of not listening the right way. You know, so when I try to active listen, I try to sort of, you know, not be on a phone or on a laptop at the same time, because you don't really listen properly when you do it that way. So a lot of what I've got to try and say to people is, you've got to listen the right way. You've got to listen for what they're telling you, rather than just, you know, I think a lot of the time people listen to respond, and there's a subtle change that you have to sort of get in your mind, which is, I'm not listening to respond, I'm listening to understand. You know, and I think I've been really rubbish at that in the past, but I sort of tried to get better at it. It's I don't think it'll be something that I ever nail completely, but I try and get better at it as time goes on.
Good stuff. No, really, really good insight there, Barry. Thanks for that. And just quickly before we kind of do some questions, you touched on it, Wendy, just around the whole, if someone's in the office and it's in work time and then having to travel back to home, so that there's a few kind of HR implications around that, actually. So some of the things that we're thinking about at the minute is and this will certainly come out in the next few weeks, as businesses actually plan around a hybrid model. Is, you know, at the moment your contract of employment will state your place of work. So that might be Dunfermline, it might be Edinburgh, but if it's a kind of work from anywhere, work from home, there's a potential change there around that. And then there's also a potential change around, like, how you maybe pay expenses. If someone's, you know, going to visit a client or off-site somewhere, how does that all work? So there's going to be some information around that, you know, that you need to kind of consider. So I think the approach that you're both taking around listening to your staff and doing a temperature check, etc., that's all stuff, because that's potentially a consultation exercise you have to go through. So, you know, that's something that we're going to have to kind of consider moving forward. And there's also the health and safety implications that still we still have to comply with. So there was a question in the chat around kind of PAT testing. So yep, we still have to comply with that. You still have to do workstation assessments. You know, you still need to kind of think about anybody that's got a protected characteristic under the Equality Act. So, you know, things like lone working, all the things like that might have to kind of take effect. So all of that still exists. It's just that it's done a little bit differently because people are not working in a physical office. So these are some of the kind of challenges that will certainly be coming about over the next few weeks as businesses start to form some of their plans. I've got sent a couple of questions in advance, so conscious of time, but I think some of it you've actually answered around employee well-being and engagement. But one of the things that kind of come up was around one was around internal networking, but also socialising. So it's like, I suppose it's like the staff came to social nights and all that. How, you know, have you got plans around that? How does that look in the future if people are kind of remote? I don't know if you guys have done anything on that so far, or do have plans for that.
Yeah, we've done some quite cool stuff. We've done escape rooms. Didn't ever think you could do an escape room on a Teams call, but it's completely possible to actually do that. We've had race nights. We've had marbles raced down a sort of video track. So we try and do a sort of social once every month. I think we're toying with the idea of doing a cookery one soon. So basically somebody cooking and everybody else following along with them, you know, from that side. So yeah, different things. We've even just done one where we've just had a drink and just socialised. You know, there isn't really a. I think the challenge of it's finding something that everybody likes. So what we've embraced is that, look, we're not going to get everybody on every call. You know, so sometimes it's a subset of a group of people that have a sort of, I guess, a kind of particular interest or whatever. But we sort of try and do one every month and just change the theme of it, you know. But we're definitely starting now to think about, you know, there are people that want to meet in person now, that want to socialise in a more in-person environment, and again, for people that are happy to do that, we are happy to facilitate it.
Yeah, fantastic.
You must have quite a shy lot, because ours, like the team, there's pockets of the team that have got, but they've set up their own type little sort of social engagements. But I tried doing like a virtual open office and some social engagements and things. But I think maybe it's the nature of, and it might be our culture as well. But we've got predominantly got a lot of developers. And so when they were in the office, they still wouldn't speak to each other. They would message each other right next to each other. So that's still there. So we've tried a few things, but we've never really managed like any real social stuff. But we met in the park. We managed to do 2 groups at Pittencrieff Park on Friday, and that was the first time we'd not all, but the design team met, and then they left, and then the sort of leadership team appeared, and that was nice. Just had lunch together, and a bunch of dogs. Everybody's dogs came. It was a bit carnage, but yeah. So we're starting to get to that level as well. So it's good. I like the sound of these things, though. These I mean, the most we've probably done. You can use like kudos within Breathe HR, we do that quite, and a lot of the team do that for just like outstanding work or helped or saved the day or whatever. And then we do use praise within MS Teams, but if you get a praise one, then that's a hero of the week, and then you get a voucher for that. And it depends on the levels. So today I've got on my to-do list, one of them's getting a Home Bonico voucher because they went above and beyond, but it's between 20 and sort of 50 depending on their graded. So, and it depends how many nominations come in. So we've got little things going on, but I'm liking the social events.
Let's to get back to some of that. Fantastic. Good. And I've got one question in the chat that's come up, was just around obviously getting some people back into the office, and it looks like a particular team not so keen on that, but the looks of it. So it's how do we kind of get them to change their mindset, I suppose. So I suppose can answer to that. Probably just try to kind of sell the reasons why you need them back in the office occasionally. You know, explaining that. I'll pick that one up with you offline just to maybe get a bit more detail on it. But yeah, I think just explaining the business reasons behind it, why the organisations needing a presence in the office on occasion. And then just try and get people's kind of buy-in. But yeah, maybe changing the mindset. I suppose it's listening. Barry touched on that. So listening to any challenges people might have around that, and then I suppose trying to kind of find some middle ground. But
we're kind of working on making our office environment a little bit more somewhere that you would actually want to visit.
Yeah.
So change. So I'm going to you know, it was a traditional office. It's got, you know, all the desks and things like that. So we do actually have it doesn't really need investing in new stuff because it's all there, but just rejigging it a little bit and making it a little bit more, you know, that like having the sofas, maybe little stand-up desks, going to have some plant walls with like fruit growing on them. I mean, I know it sounds, they're just small things, but you know, it actually makes it an enjoyable place to visit as well, and that people want to meet and want to come to, even on a short-term basis, and then start to build up that. Because I think maybe people are thinking, oh, I'll just go back to that environment that was there, you know, 15 months ago, and it'll just be the same. And then so it's changing that mindset about what that environment looks like and works like now.
Yeah, good. That's a good answer, actually, Wendy. Good. So conscious of time, just run over a couple of minutes. So I'd like to thank everybody for attending, but huge thanks to Wendy and Barry for giving up your valuable time. I know that you're both very, very busy people, but really enjoyed the insight that you kind of given this morning. I could listen to you both all day, actually. There's some really good stories and some examples out there. But really appreciate you giving your time this morning. Really good insight into what's kind of going on in both your businesses and the plans for the future. And just finally to close, we're looking to kind of host another event at the beginning of August. The theme this time will be on the Great Resignation, which probably a similar type theme around, I suppose, culture and values a little bit. But obviously I touched on it very early on in the session today. We are seeing people starting to kind of move jobs, etc. So I think it's just having a look at what steps you could be taking as an employer to attract talent and retain talent. So we'll share further details on that in terms of what the event's about in more detail. But if you can keep that date free for now, the 5th of August at 9:30, that would be great.